All right then, mate. So, bless you for giving me an hour of your time to
No
talk
worries.
post kiddo creation and stuff. I'm really excited to talk to you. The people that I've been talking to on Kitten Nuggets,
Yeah.
um, everybody I interview tends to be somebody from a totally different area that I've never talked to before. So it's not like I'm not like, you know, uh, Joe Rogan has, and then you're my 100th film director or whatever else.
Yeah.
You're my first, believe, you're my first film director.
Exciting.
Toby was my first actor. Nick was
Yeah.
my first producer. Whitney was my first music PR person. So these are all firsts, which is really exciting.
Sweet.
Um, but from the benefit of people stumbling upon this series. Can you just give me an introduction on? Doesn't have to be brief. It can be as tangential and into the woods and out of the woods and over the hills
Yeah.
as you want. But just let people know who Brett is.
Yeah. Yeah. No worries. First off, thanks for having me. Also excited. So I'll do like a brief version. So I am a writer, director,
Yes.
occasional cinematographer. So I originally trained as a journalist.
Ah,
I
didn't know.
sort of, apart from briefly when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a forensic pathologist because I really liked Quincy M.E. But after that, I've only ever wanted to really be a filmmaker. But someone convinced me that journalist was like a smarter career move or something.
Hmm.
So I went down that route at university and pretty quickly realized I wish I'd done a film degree,
Mm.
but I didn't. So I specialized in broadcasting my final year. And then when I graduated, um, I immediately tried to go freelance, and I wasn't really mature enough or equipped to do it. I thought I could because when I was at university, I'd spent like a big chunk of my student loan on buying a camera, a Canon XL2. And then I went and like filmed gigs and music events, made some short films and stuff. But I just wasn't equipped to work for myself when I left university.
How many people are?
I was quite depressed at the time. It's not the key place to start a business. So
No.
eventually I got a job at a advertising and PR agency. So they originally hired me as a writer because of my journalism background. But I told them I wanted to like do video, provide video for them. I ended up staying 5 years and setting up the video arm of that business
Mm.
until I eventually realized if I don't leave soon, I will be here for the rest of my life, sort of making things that are adjacent to what I want to do, but not actually what I want to do. Like a lot of the work, I learned a lot about how to run a business, about how to make films all the time, but I wasn't getting to make stuff that I wanted to. And it felt like sort of pretending to be a filmmaker a little bit.
Mm.
So I left that company to go. This was in 2015, 2016. And I decided I was going to go travel for a year and do a daily vlog on YouTube. Um, so that's what I did for about 6 months, actually. I left that company. I like traveled around Europe because I wanted to have one last go before Brexit happened. And just see all of it because everyone goes really far away when they travel. I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
I want to see what's like, see my neighbors. Um, so I did that. And then when I came back, I'd sold everything to go traveling, like literally pretty much everything I owned apart from a laptop, some clothes, and a little point and shoot camera. So when I got back from traveling, I turned some of the footage from the vlogging that I'd been doing into this rom-com documentary about breaking up with my partner at the time because when we broke up, she left me 7 letters with instructions on when to open them. And I thought that sounded like a rom com. So I made a documentary about opening them. And that kind of kick-started my filmmaking career, as it were. That film got selected by Short of the Week. It did festivals all over the world. It won a few competitions where I won equipment and money and stuff. And it just got my name out and about just enough so that things started snowballing. And then everything's easier with momentum. And it gave me the momentum that I've kept like rolling along with ever since, and jumped from project to project to project. But that's basically where I started and how I ended up more or less where I am now.
And I saw that. That was that vlog that you're alluding to, or the rom-com,
Mhm.
whatever you want to call it, that was the first thing that Jordan showed me, because he said, I think you were the next person in line of his recommendations. I think we've said in the past it was Lewis, but I think you were next. I think he said, I've got this best friend, and he's a director. He wasn't sure whether he wanted to be a director either at the time, and was quite conflicted, I think, because I think he wanted to sink his teeth into the film, but he felt that you would do a better job. Not technically. I don't. I mean, he didn't say either way, but
Yeah.
I sensed it wasn't about the technical ability. It was just the depth of your film nerd knowledge.
I get, but also me and Jordan, we have a really good working relationship together
Yeah,
as
of course, of
a
course.
director and DOP. Like
No, no doubt, no doubt.
we
Yeah,
we fill some gaps, as it were, for each other. And we've learned that from a few projects that we ended up making together. Like he came on very last minute for a film that we made called The Good Book.
right.
We'd been in pre-production for about like 4 or 5 months. This 30-minute short film with what is like quite a big budget for a short film. And our DOP dropped out with like 2 weeks, no, a month to go before we were going to shoot. So I immediately went to Jordan, but he was about to go to Vietnam in 2 days' time for 3 weeks. So he would get back like 3 days before we started shooting. Um, and somehow, between him being in Vietnam, us sending emails, sorting stuff out, we ended up collaborating together on this film and made something we were both really proud of, and sort of surprised ourselves with what we were able to do in a short period of time. And then worked on other bits and bobs together. And we just felt like it makes sense when we work together, we bring out the best in each other. And whilst we don't have exactly the same taste, we understand each other's tastes. And
Yeah,
when that comes
respect
together,
each
do
other's taste.
something
Yeah, yeah.
new and cool.
No, for sure. And I think I'm the same, from well, now with film, but historically with music. I'd much rather work with people that I know, trust, and kind of respect, not
Yeah.
kind that I respect. Because it makes the process. I think creatively, you have to have a kind of trust with each other. The feedback that's coming back is coming from a good place, and that's something hard to kind of interpret often, I found in the past. So when you do find people that you can kind of go, what about this daft idea? And the feedback that comes back is the feedback it deserves, rather than how they feel at the time, or whether it undermines them in some kind of way, or whatever else. So when you do find those people, I've found I stick to them like glue. And I certainly with Chris as my right hand man on music, and Nick with producing, I kind of don't want to work with anybody else now.
Yeah, once you find your people and your
It takes
team,
so long, doesn't it? I
it's
mean, I don't know how long it took
exciting.
you, but yeah.
It's an exciting moment. It matters. It means something that because it's unlikely that you find a small collection of people who all have the same taste,
Mm.
similar interests, want to, explore the same themes. When you find them, that's a precious thing to
It
protect.
is. It is. And it took me a really long time as well to find those people. Whereas it did sound like you'd kind of dropped on together with Jordan. How did you get to, so you knew Jordan because of that film, or had you already known each other anyway?
So we met just because we both became freelancers in Sheffield at a very similar
Okay.
time. We'd spotted each other's work about. I'd seen something he'd made, he'd seen something I did. And we decided to go for a pint one day near my old studio on the Wicker. Um, we just hit it off. We talked for like 2, 3 hours,
Yeah.
went our separate ways, and then we were sort of chucking work each other's way, like corporate commercial stuff.
Yeah.
And then we slowly started to like talk more about films, what we liked, what we enjoyed. And then the Good Book came along, and I was just like, I think Jordan could do this. he gets what I'm going for. That was a unique one because I'd shortlisted it, I'd broken the script down, I'd done like a crap-o-matic, like fake animatic of the whole film. So it was possible for someone to walk in and start doing it. But
A
like,
what? A crapomatic?
yeah, so like if you make like an animatic, so you do sort of like an animated storyboard, because I made it myself, it's crap. So it's just like bits of drawings and photos and text.
Okay.
So it's a crap-o-matic. But you could watch the whole film before we'd made it,
Right.
a version of it where I did all the voices and like all the staging stuff. And it was useful to know that, like, oh, well, the script runs about this long. This is how many shots are here. Like a really rudimentary, like, model of the film
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we could all sit round and discuss. Um, but yeah, we met over a pint basically, and then just kept working together. And now we're neighbors.
Oh, are you really?
He lives like a street away.
Huh? Well, I think I've said it before, really, and it probably sounds, if you've watched any of these, it'll be like, oh, here he goes again. But as it was my first experience of filmmaking, I think I said to Toby that I my expectations of what a film director, DOP, producer, whatnot, is that you're. I mean, I knew you anyway. I'd met you a few times anyway, and we talked on Zoom. So I got a handle, and I'd seen your original film. So I had a handle on you, and I knew you probably were. It was unlikely you're going to be a tyrant, beating everybody over the head
Yeah.
with a stick, undermining, criticizing, uh, the whole set, and you didn't. In fact, I don't think I ever caught you over the 4 days really talk to anybody across a room about any feedback. It was also kind of symbiotic. The whole thing was just everybody knew. I mean, I didn't anticipate anywhere near the level of meticulousness of shots, and I didn't expect that level of preparation, really. But it was almost like when you were there, you didn't almost need to be there because it just
Yeah.
happened.
I
And
think like
it was more whispers in the ear of, yeah, well, I'm gonna have that shot, and yeah, put that shot.
yeah, exactly. Like, and a lot of like a film at that level is about the preparation.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the work gets done in prep. I think like a lot of the direction as far as cast gets done in the casting.
Yeah.
Uh, if you've got a cast that you love and you like what they're doing, it's about you like supporting them to do their best work and bring their interpretation of the words,
Right.
and not like I'm not a big believer in trying to like really really heavily note an actor to get it exactly how I've imagined in my head. The joy of it is when I see this like absolute pro reinterpret it through their own like creative lens. That's exciting.
Yeah.
So I think, but also like every actor's different, and that's why I don't think you can have like an approach as a director. It's a it's a job about dealing with people, and every person needs a slightly different level or type of understanding. So I think like that's the key of it. And I don't think the other thing that I'm really keen on, because I've seen it the other way and I've been on sets where it's the other way, I don't think anyone should ever be shouted at work. Like I understand the need to occasionally shout to be heard or for like safety reasons or whatever, but no one should ever get shouted at for something at work. And I don't respond well to like combative or like aggressive leadership. What that makes me do is think, all right, well, I'm a grown man, so I'm not scared of you. So fuck you. I'll I'll just quietly not do it now, or I'll very quietly give you 5% of my effort. So I have no time for that. So it's really important to me, even when it's stressful, to try and keep on top of like kindness first, like on a film set, at work, and just with people, generates better work. And I'm really not into the idea of like, you know, aggressive creative geniuses who treat people like shit to get the best out of them, or like, you know, I can't believe there's a time where like it was just all right to fire a gun off behind an actor's head because you want that performance. Like that, they're professional actors, don't need that, and that's just this maverick, boyish sensibility that I don't have.
Do you think that my perception of what how a director might be like, just shelving that I already knew you and knew what you'd be
Yeah.
like, do you think that is just an old stereotype and
No,
actually really? So
it's still very prevalent. Yeah.
and the people that you've seen be like that, are they? I mean, I don't know how old are you? Sorry to.
I'm 34.
Okay, so there's not that, there's 20 years difference between you and I. So you're it the people that you've seen use that old approach, have they been people my kind of generation or younger?
No, I don't think it's like necessarily a generational thing. I've seen
Okay.
it at all ages. Sometimes, so I think most bad behavior comes from insecurity or fear.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Like that's what it is. So I've seen people who are quite inexperienced assume that the way to earn respect is to behave like this maverick big time person, shout at people, swearing, and that commands respect. The reality is, as we all should know, it doesn't. What it creates is a massive group of crew members going outside every second they can to have a moan about the
Yeah.
person behaving like a prick. It's not a good working environment. It's not a great way to make.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, but I've seen it with people my age, younger, older. It's an approach, and also it's one that's maybe more prevalent in like the traditional old school industry of it, which is starting to be stamped out. But like I work very much in like the independent film world. So we have a little bit more control over how we want our set to be, especially, if you're the director or producer, you set the tone. And like, I've had those conversations with people. It's on us to set the tone.
Yeah.
Like it spreads throughout the set. What the tone of like the leadership is spreads. And I've had it, I've been on sets where the directors and producers aren't great and they work everyone to the bone, and you're there at like a 7 a.m. call and they're turning up at 10. And that sort of stuff doesn't make anyone feel good. Like you should be getting stuck in making a cup of tea, cleaning the mud off cables. And for me, because I've worked in various departments as well, maybe I'm a bit more like conscious of that because I've been the one moaning about how we're being led.
Yeah, and that's the last thing you'd want, 40 or 50 odd people to be like with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of a positive and a negative really about the fact that I don't, and this is not false flattery, but so long as you're willing to work with me again, I don't want to work with anybody else again, because I feel like I do. I feel like I found a director and I found a DOP and a producer, and even further broader with everybody that's doing sound and they're doing set design. I just feel like I found this like massive block of amazing people that have all been kind of handpicked by yourself and Lewis and Jordan. That means I maybe I will never experience what the horrors of the other approach really.
Yeah. But I mean, that's really nice to hear, because one of the keys for us is bringing together a really good group of people
that
make the thing, so that like the experience of being at work, which, because it is work, even though it's an artistic creative endeavor, you're still at work. So there are things people should expect when they're at work in terms of how they're treated, spoken to, what's provided for them. And like we take that seriously. We want it to be a positive place. So it's really heartening that as like you felt that, and that that feels like a thing you would want more of, because that's how I want to work. They're the kinds of people I want to work with as well, and the sets I want to be on. Because
Yeah.
no one should be dreading going to work, especially if you're lucky enough to be doing something that is
Love. Yeah.
creative and artistic, and the sort of thing that like a lot of people, I dreamed of being able to do this sort of stuff for work. I might
Same.
not be doing it at like, you know, what's considered a really high-end level, but I'm getting to make stuff that I care about for my job and make a living from it. That doesn't mean anything if the act of doing it is torture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shouldn't be. Like there is a way to have both, but it's on us to make that be the case. Too many people pass the buck as far as where the atmosphere on set comes from. I think you've got to make it a priority alongside the storytelling and the piece and the thing, that like the welfare of the people that are working with you as well.
Yeah. Well, I think I think of those four days, and I'm really pleased I was able to go to all of them with real fondness, really. And
You were also a really, really like, this is a shit word, but a really nice, calming presence to have on set for everybody. Like everyone, like the crew all commented on like, ain't Scott lovely? And you just very like
nice.
really like pleased and like happy to be there.
I was
And
like a kid in a sweet shop. I know it's a real cliche, but I really felt like, because I've wanted to work in film all my life, really, but I didn't really find the space to be able to do something like we've done. So when I finally got there at such a late hour in my lifeline
yeah,
timeline, it really did feel like I just kept thinking, well, what are we going to do next? I was thinking about where we could go next while we were in it,
yeah.
because I wanted more of it. And with the
Like
same,
being a play, isn't it?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
when it's at its best, it's like playing for work.
yeah. I think it is. I think that the thing that is different, and I know you shouldn't keep comparing one over the other, but the only different thing I felt with the film over recording an album, let's say, was it did feel like, but I think that's because I wasn't as deep into it as you were, but it didn't feel like there were as many places where you could explore because it was so meticulously planned. But I think if I had 50 odd people in a recording studio, I would be a lot more meticulously planned than with me, Nick, and Chris, let's say.
But then on the other hand, for me, I didn't feel like that. I felt like I am a big believer that you prepare to improvise.
Yeah,
Like the reason for the preparation is so that you're so sure of what you need and what will make the film work together,
yeah,
that you can then throw it away, improvise, get this thing, and know how it edits. Also, it helps that I was the editor on this film. I always edit my own stuff, and I'm shooting with an edit in mind.
yeah.
Jordan knows that. So for me, it felt like we've done all this planning. So in a very selfish way, I'm like, right, let's go play now.
Yeah,
And then I'm like, all right, that was a cool idea. We have written that down. We did say we were going to get that, but
but that's
what
true.
if we
And
didn't?
I think all it was because I was a relatively passive observer to it all. I didn't see as much. I think,
Yeah,
like, for example, when you went on the bus, I couldn't, because it was so cramped in there anyway. I couldn't sit through
that was tough.
every single. Yeah, I missed a lot of that because I wanted I to go on there and take shots as well.
Yeah,
Um, so and yeah, so I think there was a lot of behind the scenes direction rather
yeah.
than you with a megaphone shouting at everyone.
Yeah, I don't think you need to do it that way. Like,
No, I know,
yeah,
but
like, but some people do. Sometimes you do have to, and the size of the thing dictates how you
yeah,
do it.
yeah,
But for that one, it got to be a really quiet, like personal, like going over to people and speaking about stuff, and also trusting all the heads of department that like we brought them on, we liked their work, so just trusting them to go get on with it,
yeah,
and spending more time like on a lot of like Indian micro budget films. Sometimes the director doesn't get to spend as much time with their cast as they should,
right,
because this feeling you've got to micromanage everything that's going on, because sometimes maybe people are less experienced than on a like higher budgeted thing, but that never felt like the case here. so I could direct my energies where I thought they were needed rather than trying to micromanage everything, which was nice.
One thing that happened, I think when I arrived, it'd already been done. When I got to the green room and Toby, Lauren, Paddy, and Lisa were already there, you had a chat with them about, I guess, your vision of what you wanted from the film or whatever else. But I've not asked anybody what kind of went on with those guys before you started, because I know Toby alluded to I think a film reference that really connected with him.
Okay, yeah. So I do like, I speak in references quite a bit, which is really useful if the person you're speaking to has heard of the thing,
Yeah.
but not so much if they haven't. So I'm trying to get out of the habit a little bit, especially as I'm like developing a few things and having to pitch stuff. And if someone's not heard of a comp that you're using and it's absolutely vital to the pitch,
Yeah.
you need to be able to express it otherwise. So I'd written some notes and the journey that I thought each of the characters was supposed to be on. But I'd done that as like a point of discussion with the cast. I was like, this is what I've imagined, but like, what do you think? What journey are they on? Who are they? Where are they at? So I had those conversations in various forms with the cast. Some of them online over Zoom, some over email, and then that chat on the day. I think I referenced a few films that we were looking at either visually or tonally. So like a visual or tonal, or even just the moment it was made was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which felt like an obvious one. We referenced a lot of 70s horror, but also, you know, I think someone asked Toby Hooper what Texas Chainsaw Massacre, what's it about?
Right.
And he gave a one-word answer. He just said meat. Um, so it felt like that was in there, and I know that I spoke to Toby about that. Possession, like by Jofsky, that's always a big one for me. I love the tone of Possession, the way that it's a horror that is really about something else. So I'd made a load of notes. I tried not to overload the cast with like my thoughts on it. I just gave the things that were key and then saved some of that for like moments on set where maybe there was just something else we could like throw in or talk about. But I try not to overload because also I really loved all of the cast that we got. Like I really liked their work. I'd worked with some of them before. I wanted them because I trusted that they would interpret the characters
Yeah.
that, if not in exactly the way I'd imagined, in a way that I would really like and would like serve the story. So yeah, I can't actually remember exactly what we talked about that moment, but that morning, but I know I wasn't in there super long. I tried to keep it brief, and I just had a couple of sentences that throughout the course of filming I'd keep going back to whenever we were looking for, a want or a need or something.
You know, with the four people that we're talking about, what were your favorite kind of moments with all four of those individually? Can you break that down? Like which bits kind of made
Yeah.
you stand on an end a little?
Okay. So I'll start with Lisa, who's
Yeah.
KIDDO, because it makes sense. So I'd originally worked with Lisa on a piece of theatre where we were in Hull for basically a year when it was City of Culture. And she was like one of the co-leads in that piece. And she was just really like lovely, but really skilled and great. So when we were thinking about KIDDO, she was probably the I'll turn my messages off as well. She was probably like the first person that I thought of,
Yeah.
just because of her look and how like what a durable, versatile, like good to be around person she is, like for a spirit on set. So I love her performance throughout. I think it's I think she captures exactly who Kiddo is meant to be. Maybe my one of my favorite bits as far as the story of us getting it and how we did it has been cut from the film, which was a really difficult moment in the edit.
Oh,
But they say kill your darlings, and I definitely did because it was one of my favorite shots we got, and a really interesting, strong performance from basically we'd ran over one day. We needed this shot as written in the script, that was like pretty emotionally heavy. Also, we were losing light rapidly. We had to get to a location. The camera team, Lisa, me and the AD Callum, we got there. It was already dark. So it was sort of too late for what we were gonna get. But on the way, I'd sort of come up with a vague lighting plan. I was like, we could do this. If Jordan's not got something, we'll do this. Me and Jordan met. He was like, any ideas? I was like, yeah, I've got this. What have you got? He was like, yeah, let's try that. So we went for this like moonlight thing hidden behind a tree. And because we were also getting close to running over time, we had to release Lisa. We couldn't keep her any longer. So we did one take of this shot, and Lisa was absolutely fantastic in it.
really?
Really like emotionally powerful. It looked great. We'd all just brought our like A games together for this half an hour block at the end of a day where we were running out of time to get this thing, and it was really great. And it's heartbreaking that it's not in the film because it's a really strong individual scene. But in the edit, it just didn't need to be there anymore in terms of the pace and the story we're telling. So, and sometimes they're the best for you as someone working on a thing. It's always when you know a little bit of a story behind the shot or the thing that didn't make it can be the most satisfying. So, just Lisa getting stuck in and absolutely nailing that was like, I went away in such a good mood. That stands out to me. Um,
What did she say? What was this? What was the scene?
there was no dialogue.
Oh,
That's what,
really?
there was no dialogue in it. It was just a, try not to give any spoilers, but
No.
it was a reaction to something and a coming to terms with something that was done without dialogue.
Oh.
Uh, and she just, yeah, just nailed it. Like really, really impressive.
It was dark and it was shitting it down with rain, wasn't it? Because that was
Yeah,
that's the only bit I missed.
yeah. And it's one of those things where after it happened, I felt so good about us pulling it off under the circumstance. But yeah, as soon as I got to that bit in the edit and I looked around it and I knew it had to go, sometimes I like and ah for ages. I made the decision really quickly. I was like, it's got to go. I love it. I love it, but it's got to go. So that would be that for Lisa. I think Paddy, if I talk about like Paddy, I think we met on a short film that we did together that no one will ever see because it was made like for private use by a particular company or something. But he was great. We were shooting really, really hot conditions in this small house. And like I realized when we were done, I was like, I've not really met Paddy until we wrapped. He was, if not in, he was hanging around character the
Right.
whole time. I was just really impressed by his work ethic, like his toolkit as an actor. I was like, I want to make something with you. So like when I was writing it, I sort of had Paddy in mind for that role, I suppose.
See it.
Like I
Right.
could see that he would be that, and like even his headshot, he wears like a very similar costume in
Does,
his.
yeah,
So like for me, what was satisfying was getting him on set and just seeing him do his thing and it be what I thought it was going to be, like that what I'd hoped he would do. And like my favorite thing for Paddy is like I said, I think you should speak to every actor like how they individually need. You can't approach it with like a one size fits all style. And we had like a fun thing how we would talk and exchange notes. Sometimes it was done a bit like conspiratorially and like quietly in a corner with that. And sometimes if he'd like, you'd give him a note and he'd just be like, yeah, and just walk away, like take it. But then he'd come back and he would, it'd all be there, especially if there were things about marks or like his physicality. You'd come back and every single note would be placed exactly where it was. Like he's got a really impressive, like technical grasp of what he can do.
Yeah.
So I loved that. I loved that. With Lauren, what I thought was amazing was it's a spoiler, but it's fine. Just one, how amazing she was with our essays.
Yeah.
Like we had a big group of essays, and she really was like chief morale officer for everyone. She kept the spirits really high, like such a good vibe and atmosphere when she was there, and a really like positive, happy energy in what could have been some really like challenging, dark scenes that we were doing. Like in between stuff, she kept it light and she kept it fun for everybody. And really, really liked the more like, I'll say like horror-y, gory stuff. Really got stuck into that, had a proper laugh around that, which just put everyone at ease. And you know, it just, it was just a cool, right? Because you're into this, everyone else feels comfortable. So that just and like quite aside from how much I love the performance, just who and how she was on set.
Yeah.
You don't have to go that above and beyond to make everyone feel like an equal and like part of it, and that she did. I respect wholeheartedly. And then
Sorry, just before you go on to Toby, I think that's something that I learned from watching that was if you see it in the context of there's a group of actors playing parts in a scene, that as soon as you're stopping and waiting, they were still the same group of people in the scene, but the cameras weren't on. And I think you're absolutely right that like because Toby or Bev and Jasper were, dad and son, and they were separate from, they also were outside of the shots as well. And couldn't be like, and I think midway through the film, I think they kind of relaxed a bit, but because it was kind of shot other way around, certainly on that first day in the queues and everything else, and without giving anything away, there was definitely a tension between those two and everyone else. And like you're absolutely right with Lauren and with Lisa, but Lisa was very distracted. But she also, I don't know what I'm trying to say. It was kind of, you kind of sensed it whether the cameras were on or not.
I'm with you. They carried the core of who their characters were into how the groups formed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've seen a bit of that in Paddy's process in the other thing that we did where he's trying to like, not to speak on behalf of him, but I feel like he's using the energy of the room in between stuff to make sure he stays close to where he wants to be. And you're right, that happened, and it makes total sense that Lauren would be doing that for what was her gang.
She's the brightest one of the lot. She's the one that's sensing things on 100%. And also even the essays, the fact that they all didn't know each other, but they were all the same age. So they had relatable, they could relate to each other, but they didn't know each other. And that's absolutely right to how the metaphor would work anyway.
And as an essay, being an essay can be a bit of an unforgiving job sometimes because you're needed there all the time. But it can be the case that you're sometimes like forgotten about, or you don't feel like you're as important as everyone else, even though you are. And I know that because, like, again, I've been part of that gang and I've been there, and like, so we were really lucky that we had such a good bunch there as well. Like, really were who we needed them to be. Really cool. And then Toby, obviously, similar to everyone else, that first and foremost, brilliant. Like, just exactly who Bev needed to be. And I feel like I'd had my eye on Toby for a while.
Mm.
Uh, he's got the same agent as my partner. So
Right.
I'd seen him on the website when I was just looking like, oh, I'll have a look at your profile. Toby was, I was like, you've got a great face. And then I had a look at some of his stuff. I was like, right, you're in my brain. So again, one of my first thoughts um for this. So I love his performance. I love how scary he is in certain points, and how that exists only as an undertone in other places, as it should be. Just really, really cool. But what a cool, fun guy to have around, to have on set. Like, I think everyone got on really well with him, and like so knowledgeable about so much stuff,
Mm.
just ready and able to strike up a conversation with anyone about anything. Which again, when you're on like a short film on a small set, making sure that those personalities gel is so important, and he really helped make that happen. And like a fountain of knowledge as far as references and like other films and stuff. And we could reference a scene in a thing and he'd be like, yeah, okay. So
Well,
yeah.
I interviewed him a few days ago. It's up now, actually.
Yeah.
And he alludes to the fact that when he goes through the plastic sheeting to see the group, he is channeling Texas Chainsaw
Yeah,
Massacre
yeah.
entirely. And it was when we were talking about it, we were talking about that scene, and he said, "Oh, and that was the reference." I was like, "That makes total sense." And weirdly, I think when you and I talked, we referenced a particular scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, you shouldn't do it, but I wrote it in the script,
oh, did you?
like for that moment. In the draft that went out, it says in the script, like there's a reference to the film for
Right.
that moment. And then we spoke about it beforehand, spoke about it there, and it did become like a big, like, you know, touchstone for us as far as what we were doing visually and the tone of some moments and the panic that's in that film. But also, it's a great example of low budget, awesome filmmaking.
Mm.
Which, that's the school that we were all approaching it from.
Um, Regarding the story
Mhm.
and excuse me, the approach to that.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that we operated as from my initial conversation to Jordan to where we got to where the script was finished, was that fairly orthodox, do you think? As in, some Burke appears with an idea broadly, and then you kind of take it on. I mean, is that relatively normal, do you think?
So, for me, no. This is the first time that I'd done it in this particular way. So normally, I write and direct my own stuff,
Right.
or I am directing someone else's script. I've done that a few times,
Okay.
but to like develop someone else's original idea. So for those listening, I suppose, like the kernel of the idea for Kiddo and the characters and like a lot of the settings, they were an idea you had to tell a story that you wanted to share that was about a thing.
Yeah.
And you took that to Jordan first because you knew Jordan, and then that started to develop into how would that be a film and who might these characters be, what would the story and the plot be for it. So for me, I'd never been approached with a starting point or an original story or an original piece of material that I then had to write a screenplay, write a script for. I think we went we went through a few different iterations of what the idea was, how we got there. We originally went to someone else to do a script based on that idea, and that script came back and it wasn't quite it wasn't exactly what we wanted, and it took the story somewhere else away from what we thought. And I think it was partly necessity that we were starting to run out of time to get the script to be where we needed it to be. We'd all had a lot of conversations about what's going on here, what's it about. Like, no one knew it better than we did as a group at that point, what it was supposed to be. And if I was going to direct it, then there was a shorthand way of getting it done quicker. If I wrote it, it then made it simpler for the directing of it. It gave us way more control over a thing that then if we had a completely separate writer that we're then tied to, I can feel more confident about decisions that I'm making about cuts and changes and whatnot. If I've done it. So I feel like the me writing it was sort of out of necessity. And it's the first time I've done it that way. I would normally either a script comes to me, I'm like, yes or no. Or I'm writing my own thing with a view to making it. But this was a really interesting, fun process for me that I had like a starting point and everything just sprung off from it. And I've worked on some stuff since where it's been a bit more of like a development process and a writer's room and stuff.
Right.
And this really helped me with that process. But what was it like? What was it like for you to have like an idea and then pass it off and be like, write it?
The thing about it is because I'm so ancient, and I've had so many instances where I've come forward with something and I haven't either got the end result I wanted or I haven't particularly enjoyed the journey. I did come into our kind of journey with quite a lot of reservations and worries about what it would ultimately end up being, because I hadn't known you all very long.
Yeah.
And certainly during the honeymoon period, everybody's dead nice and lovely, and then they can change. And then that sounds cynical, and it's just the scars that I bear, really.
It's a reality as well.
Yeah. So I think I almost kind of want to rub out the bit about the person that originally took the script on, because I felt like we drove into a cul-de-sac and then reversed quite guiltily out of it because it wasn't the right person. Because also I've talked to other people that have had that I've since that have had their say books turned into films and that kind of stuff, and I was kind of sharing my experiences in the early days with them. They were like, you've no idea what it can be like. You can write a best-selling book and it gets sold to a film company, and they won't want to talk to you, and you're just not relevant. And that seems quite strange, really. And I think there was another example. It was a documentary I was watching on Blade Runner.
Oh yeah.
and the because I didn't realize until very, very recently, because I've just recently watched Blade Runner again, the first one, was that the story was really only like one story within the book rather than the book. It was predominantly based on just like everything revolving around this guy's room, as opposed to this world that was opened up with by kind of Ridley Scott's directing kind of vision. So
and that's also got a really interesting story, like David Peoples and the other writer, that it's co-written, and
it was
quite pulled and dragged around a lot, and there's controversy about who did what and stuff. Like, not a pleasant experience to what it's ready to make, I don't think.
And I think from what I'd found out about and how we'd initially start, I thought that's going to happen to me, because I've come forward with this idea with Jordan. John's gone, I'll go and get a script writer. And I'm like, okay, can I meet that script writer? And then he was like, oh, here it is. And it was like I hadn't had that dialogue with that person, and I thought, no, this is miles out. Like, it doesn't need any polishing. This is miles out. And I think we gave that person an opportunity to be directed back into where we needed to be, maybe 3 or 4 times, and then in the end, and it wasn't out of frustration. I think it was just more. I felt I needed to maybe flesh out my idea a bit more first, which I know I woke up at like 2 o'clock in the morning, like really thinking this film's never going to get made if this is the progress that we're making in the early, which is why I want to rub it out, because it's the only bit of the whole story that kind of is a bit of a spot on it.
I don't think it is a spot on it. I think
Well,
it wouldn't be what
I,
it is if we'd not gone
I,
through.
I totally agree, but I think the level of detail that I probably need to provide in the early stages, I don't think now I would need to, but I think at the time, if I'd have known myself a bit more, I would have provided a bit more kind of, I'd have thought about how it evolved a little bit more. But then so I presented a more established, there's a bus, there's students, there's the pink overalls, the older lady, all that kind of stuff. And then I don't know whether you thought, actually, I can do this, I can write with this now. Because I don't think you could have, no amount of unpicking from that original script would have got us anywhere. Or we'd still
part of it for me was when we got that original script, because it was still relatively early days as far as my involvement. My honest response was, I don't want to make this.
Really?
And if it's this,
Interesting,
maybe there's someone else that can do it.
yeah.
Because I don't want to make this film. I struggled with that script, and I'm not saying this to slate their work, because I've seen other stuff they've written. It's really good. It just wasn't right for this. So it's a tricky one. I think that extra information coming together and then me getting to write it, that really made me then, to be frank, it gave me the sense of ownership I needed over it to be able to direct it.
Really?
Because you spend a lot of, and I suppose we can both relate to this from two different places, that you only get to make so much stuff, and you want to put your stamp on it and be it come from something in you. And getting to write that version of the script gave me a bigger opportunity to, as well as the key message that we all knew the film was about, put some stuff and some ideas in it that I was interested in exploring in a film that might have been harder to squeeze in if I was faced with a script completed, but I want to talk about this thing. But now try and put it on that. I could just do that as part of the design, and it just forced me to be committed and in love with the project,
right?
Which was then really useful as far as my time commitment, brain commitment, all of that stuff for it. When I got involved in the script, I was then able to really feel all right, I'm part of the team now, because also I came in last. I came in last, and I felt like at least you and Jordan had talked about it a lot, and then Lewis had been there. I came in last. I was brought in as Jordan's friend who's a director, presented to you, be like, oh, this guy will do it. I'm like, well, I've got to prove my worth at some point and feel like I'm part of the gang. And getting to write the script and us go through that process of the original script not being right, fleshing out the idea a bit more, then coming up with a script where we're like, oh, this is what we want to make. This is what we want to make.
It was like the first draft you did was like, that's fucking awesome. And it was such a shift from where we were. And like everything, a first draft and you think it's awesome already, it only bodes well, really. It's just going to get better and better.
And I also had the benefit of, I knew I was going to direct it. I knew the resource we had at hand. And it meant that I always had one eye on that in the scripting of it. They're what's doable, what's realistic, what can we manage, without limiting myself to be oh, we can't do that. But I had one eye on the reality of making the thing that I was writing down as well.
I really liked it when we talked in Sheffield. It was the four of us, wasn't it? There was Kira and Jordan, you and myself, and there was a whole scene that I had originally, right from the very beginning, where they stop and they camp overnight. And I thought it was testament to how fluid we were starting to become at that point. Because you were talking about the logistics of it and the timing, and that it would make it a longer film. And I went, just cut it then. And it was and you looked at me like, okay, well, that's a fairly big scene that you're just lopping off there. But I just felt that it didn't make it any better a film with it in if we had to keep it to a certain length of time, and the speed in which we kind of decided collectively things like that was, I think, was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. These things matter. They're the decisions, basically, aren't they? Does it make it any better,
Yeah.
or whether it's here or not, it being in this place, it happening here, whatever it is.
What
And
did you
when you
put before? Did you say Killing Angels or something, or
uh,
Darlings?
kill your darlings,
Kill Your Darlings.
which is I hear it a lot around editing when you get into the edit, and it's happened a few times to me where like my favorite thing ends up not being in the film.
Right.
Devastating, but the film's stronger as a whole for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got an entire like cutting room floor of darlings that never made it into a thing.
I'd love to see that scene at night though. You have to share it with me at some
Yeah,
point.
I'll put it together properly at some point and get it sent out to everyone.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think moving forward with where we'd like it to go to, though, I think I keep thinking it'd be great if we could just have our ideas broadly put together, and we just sit down for a day somewhere and just kind of chew it through and
Yeah,
and make it quite organic. So I live for collaborations with people. I love seeing great ideas coming from other people rather than it all has to be me and it's my thing. And from a musical perspective, I think I've got that nailed now.
yeah,
And so yeah, I think that, so in a very long answer to your original question to me, which is not the order it's supposed to be,
yeah.
is yeah, I think that the original part aside, I think it was, and I totally get what you're saying is if you're writing, directing, and editing, you really, it should be you that does the writing, really, because it just, not just that you're invested in it, but just the fact that it'll just be better as a result because you can.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's not, but I know my working process, and like the more of that I can like get involved in, the more I'm like my particular way and style of doing stuff relies on having an involvement in all three of
Yeah,
those things. But that's not to say it's the best process, and I think actually a lot of people would argue it is better to separate those
oh
things
really?
because then you get a certainly at like larger scale stuff. The idea that they're going to let the director edit the film, like you'd have to fight really hard to be allowed to do that.
Really?
There's You're fighting with execs to be allowed to do most things that you want to do, which is why I love that. Like, I love short filmmaking. I love like the indie level of stuff where a small team of
It's the
creative
autonomy.
have more autonomy over
Yeah.
the thing that we're making.
Hmm. Well, I mean, we should be very proud of what's come out at the end of this, and I can't wait.
I hope people like it. I
I
try
think
yeah, I try not to say too much about it. I'm trying not to pass my own judgments. I'll just wait and see what like people think when it's out in the world in December, and then what kind of life it has after that. I am really excited for it to be out there, but as ever, like really scared about it because I'm like anything I've worked on or made, I am the worst judge of. I have no the the reality of my point of view on it can't be trusted.
how close to perfect do you think it is against your um level of kind of self critique?
So I don't think perfect's possible,
No, I agree.
but like I'm happy with the film that we've made. I'm very proud of it. Like, sometimes you make things that you're not proud to have your name on and you don't want to have to share, but you've got to dance with the one that brung you and all of that. And so you get on with it. But I'm proud to have my name on this. It feels, and also sometimes you do things that don't feel like they represent your point of view or represent your creative voice. And this does for me. I
Good.
feel like, I'm really pleased to share it with people. I hope that they like it. But in some respects, if we all like it, that'll do me.
Yeah.
You know, you make it, I think you make films for two groups really. One's yourself. You should be making something you like and you want to watch. And then there's an audience, the audience. And I'll take one out of two.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. So we've talked about the film, which is great in the process. I think anybody thinking about making a film will find all of that stuff mega interesting. But I don't think you and I have really had a chat about the stuff that really excites you from a film perspective. Not too deeply anyway, but I mean, where one thing you said when we were doing the Q&A, I think the second time we were in Manchester, and you were saying about how you love the horror genre because there's always a message. You said it a few times. There's always a message. It's not just, they're very, very rarely just
Yeah.
gratuitous slasher.
Or if not a message, there's always like horror is a vehicle to talk about other stuff. I think that's why it's such an enduring genre that's got such a dedicated audience. You know, so a friend of mine was saying they'd heard someone say, I wish just once they'd make a vampire film where it's just a vampire, you know, where it's not a metaphor for something else. And we were both saying, like, that's all vampires are. They exist to be a framing device and a metaphor to talk about other stuff. And like the best horrors do that, you know, things like I said, possession, which on in one sense might seem like a body horror film, is obviously really about like relationships and what we do to each other and like control and consent and stuff. Dawn of the Dead is a zombie film, but it's about consumerism. What's another, like Candyman? Candyman is a great example that it's like this. They created a horror icon, this mythical hooked guy, but I think it's really a film about gentrification,
Right.
basically, is what it's about. And that's what horror lets you do. You can talk about like the issue of the day or a subject that you really want to explore, and you wrap it up in horror so that it's like it's consumable and it's entertaining and it gets in there, you know, like, you know, horror films open you up and get inside, and then that message lingers and grows, and you can think about like what it means more deeply. That's when it's at its best. That's what I think horror is for. And there's a resurgence of it, you know, like a lot of like, I suppose a lot of A24 films, you look at the work that like Jordan Peele is making, like the mainstream realization that horror is like this educating, exciting tool. I love. I'm a huge fan of it. And more films are exploring like um relationships or trauma or mental health through the lens of horror cinema. Um and that's the kind that I really like, that's not just like I love a schlocky like slasher horror, or something that is a bit more cartoony and just pure fun. I love that, but I really love a film that's you're thinking about a few days later, trying to figure out like what was that about?
And then
What
what's your
what am
top
I
three?
supposed to,
What's your
what
top
was
three horrors?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Sorry.
Definitely possession.
Yep.
Possession's in there. Um, I think it counts as a horror, but I love Let the Right One In,
Okay.
the Swedish version, because it's beautiful. Like every frame of it, you could stop, and it's a beautiful, beautiful film. And then, what, third one always shifts. There's loads, but if I have to pick one currently, it's either going to be like Videodrome's always close, but I'll go with Martyrs.
Oh wow, I've not seen any of these films. I'm gonna have to watch them all.
So Martyrs, I recommend like you be in a good place when you put. Not what if you're already in the deep pit, it's only going to take you deeper. And it's a like one and done. It won't be a film you'll go back to,
Okay.
but you'll think of. I watched it like maybe 8 years ago. I'm still thinking about it now.
Really?
But there's so many amazing films, and the horror genre is one that you can sort of rely on there being an audience for your film. Like there's a really strong, wonderful like horror film community, which enables people to keep making micro budget and indie level films. And that's why so many people's entrance film is a horror, because there's an audience there waiting for it. So I've got a lot of love for like the horror genre. And I suppose it's essentially what got me into films when I was a kid, when my mum and dad, there was a show presented by Mark Cousins called Movie Drone on the BBC, and they'd show like two back-to-back films, and he would do a bit of an intro of them. And I remember when I was like primary school, they recorded The Fly, The Fly 2, Westworld, Demon Seed, and Society. They
Wow.
recorded them all on VHS. They said I was too young to stay up that late to watch them, but I could watch them on video. And these were like Westworld accepted, like these quite intense horror films. And that was my introduction to like really loving film and the poetic way Mark Cousins spoke about them. It's a big impact. And I look back on that and think of that as one of the reasons that I wanted to do it.
Well, do you have an appetite to make more? I mean, I guess I understand you, that was your primary motivator at the beginning, but do you have ideas for?
So horror and sci-fi, I will always want to make stuff in. A big reference, and together, like a big reference for me with Kiddo was The Outer Limits, and to a lesser extent, The Twilight Zone, because I'm like the flag for The Outer Limits. But the way that combines sci-fi and horror to, be allegorical storytelling all the time, I love. So I'd love to keep exploring that genre, but also, I love, my favorite film in the world is Before Sunrise, and I love drama. Yeah, I love dramas about people, and that's the. I think next for me is to make. I'm writing my feature film, and I just want to throw a lot of my favorite elements of everything in there. But I think that's probably not got any horror in it. But I would love to make another horror film. I'd love to make like a sci-fi horror. That's a dream. That's on the list.
That's on my list too.
Yeah.
And to be fair, talking to Toby, it's on his list too. So you never know what that means and where we're heading. But well, I mean, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, mate.
Yeah, that was really fun. I feel like yeah, it was good to talk about the film with each other, like actually to our rememberings of it.
Well, we've been running at a million miles an hour, haven't we, on other things at the same time. And I think when we were having meetings, they had to be kept lean because there was a lot of people involved and stuff. So yeah, we haven't really had an opportunity to, but I'm mega excited about where KIDDO can go.
Same.
And I don't think KIDDO's going to have a full stop on it. I think KIDDO is going to be doing something for a long.
When does this go out?
This interview?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know really. I kind of, one side of me wants to do it after the film is out with Alter. Another side of me is, well, if we're not going to do any spoilers, we could do it sooner. Because the thing is, even if it goes live on my YouTube account, it's not to say that it can't then be pushed again when the film's out.
We're really interested in getting people from the horror community to watch it, talk about it, review it. Chat on some podcasts about it, whatever. As we hope that like the horror community welcomes it.